Thanks for having me. Thank you, Atia, and thank you for that great introduction. But more importantly, thank you for all the work that you're doing and what you've done already in convening so many different discussions and talking about so many different people and putting together an incredible committee. So thank you very much. I want to thank Jim Rooney from the Chamber of Commerce, but before that, Jim Rooney for his leadership at the Convention Center. And when I gave a speech at the Chamber of Commerce not too long ago, Jim said right afterwards, actually right after I spoke, he said, we got to do this in the Chamber of Commerce, get the business community to step up here and do some things. I want to thank you, Jimmy, for following through on that and everything that you do. Otis Raleigh, thank you very much. We're going to hear more from Otis later on, but yesterday I was talking to Otis. I'm not going to say what you said in the room, but Boston Strong, baby. Thank you very much for everything you do and what you're doing. Pam Edinger, who's going to be moderator today. Thank you, Pam, for the great work you do, not just here in the city, but at the college, but also anytime we call, you're there for us. There's a lot of people in this room that I should be giving shout-outs to and thank yous to. I can't get into them all, and I'm not going to mention them all, but I do want to mention a few elected officials that are here, because these elected officials, and I might have missed a couple coming in, from day one, they've been part of a conversation, whether it's them personally in their districts or as a city, and I want to thank them all. State Representative Russell Holmes, Sheriff Steve Tompkins, City Councilor Ayanna Presley, District Attorney Dan Conley, City Councilman Nisha Sabi George, and other folks. If I miss you, I'll get you. I want to thank you for your great work. I want to thank Chief Willie Gross and Commissioner Billy Evans from the Boston Police Department that are here with us today, who are doing that work inside the police department. You know, I'm a firm believer in things happen for a reason. There's no question about it in my life. I can go back to dozens and dozens and dozens of stories that something happened here and something good happened there, something bad happened here, something good happened over here, or the other way around. I firmly believe that. And I think that the same can be said in this presidential election, what happened. And I know that there's a lot, I can feel a lot of tension in the city of Boston. These conversations that we're having today and that we're starting today actually started 3.5 years ago. It just so happens that we happen to be at this theater today after what happened a week and a half ago. It might not be a coincidence that we're all here today. This started 3.5 years ago when I was in a Mondays with the Mayor. I was running for mayor of the city of Boston in Jamaica Plain, and a black woman stood out. And the forum was, I'd go to talk about my vision for the city of Boston, and I'd listen to questions from people, and I'd answer it. And I had a long history of being an elected official. I was a state representative. I represented one of the most, if not the most, diverse districts in the Massachusetts legislature. My zip code, 02125, was the 5th most diverse zip code in the United States of America, and still is. And I thought I had the conversation about race down. And I was running for mayor, and I was, going out there, and anytime that the race conversation came up, or anytime the race came up, it's a tough conversation to have. I'd kind of take a little bit of deep breath and think about, okay, here we go. And a woman said to me, she says, what do you think of, what's the state of racism in Boston today? And when you're running for mayor, I mean, you don't want to say bad things. You want to say good things. And I said, well, we're doing better today than we did before. And she pushed me on it. And then she challenged me on the people that were helping me campaign. And she said, where's the diversity of your campaign? I said, well, we have diversity in the campaign. And she goes, well, are they here? I said, no, not here today. People aren't here today. But we do have diversity. And she kept pushing me, and it threw me off for the rest of the night. And I put on the smile, and I did the good political thing and the good candidate thing, and, kept a good chin up and tried to talk to her afterwards. And I felt that, to some degree, maybe she was a little unreasonable with me and not being fair because she put me on the spot. And I thought maybe she was supporting John Barros or something, and she was in there getting me. I say, John sent her over, or Charlotte sent her over. What am I going to do? Or Felix sent her over. What am I going to do? But that night, I was upset. I was angry. I was angry for a whole bunch of different reasons. I was angry because the question was asked of me. I was angry because I didn't have the right answer. I was angry because a lot of different things. And we went back the next day to Joyce Lenihan's house where we did all our policy, and we said, we got to talk about this issue. And I need an answer. I can't say we're better than we were, That's not an answer. And then we started to talk about getting into deep conversation about where are we in Boston in racism? Where are we really in Boston? Because no one's really talked about it publicly. At least not that I remember it being talked about publicly. It's been talked about publicly in pockets of neighborhoods, maybe in a church or maybe in the street corner, maybe in a coffee shop, but it really wasn't talked on a larger scale. And we started talking about it, and what we come up with was that we are going to have if we get elected, we're going to have a discussion on racism in Boston. And we announced that, and we said, this is what we're going to do. And then we applied for the 100 resilient cities. And the 100 resilient cities, when you put the application together, it's mostly about the environment, but ours was different. We talked about racism, we talked about busing, we talked about difficult things that people are angry about or people don't want to talk about. And if they do want to talk about, in a lot of ways, they want to be confrontational. Not because they want to be confrontational, but they just want to be like, wait a second, what are you talking about? Jimmy Rooney talked a little bit about it when he spoke. And we applied for that grant, and we were able to accept that grant. And we began the conversation. And some papers have written, and people have said, oh, it takes a tremendous amount of courage for you to do this, and why would you want to do this? It's not about courage. It doesn't take courage. This is the right conversation at the right time to have in the right city in the United States of America. That's what this is about. It's my hope that someday we'll look back on today. And not every Bostonian is in this room. We have about 649,000 Bostonians that couldn't make it here today. And it's important for us to understand that because this is about a new chapter in Boston's history. Now, last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, was a tough election. Tough for me personally. And I went to bed that night, and I shut the TV off, and it wasn't over, but I knew it was over. And I woke up the next day, and I turned the TV on, and I realized it was over. It was over in one sense. And I went to work the next day, and I could feel this sadness, this cloud over City Hall. In particular, with a lot of different groups of people that work there, but in particular, some of the younger people that work in the administration. So I asked Dan, I said, can you bring O&S down and bring some people down to the office, let's talk about it. And I went into that room and I saw a lot of sad faces. I saw some crying, I saw some kids very upset, and I say kids, I don't mean to be disrespectful, they're great young people. And I said to them that day, just like I'm saying to the 1,000 people in this theater, there's one of two things that we can do. One is we can just kind of sit back for the next 4 years and watch things come apart and be critical on the sideline and see things change in a bad way. Or we can take this election and take strength from it so we continue to bring change to our city. Because not one person can change what's happening in our city. When I mean that, by a leader. But what I did say to them, one person can make a change in our city. And I said, let's dig down deep. So when you leave here today and you start talking about what you saw today, what you experienced today, I want you to think about that. This dialogue is not about Marty Walsh. This dialogue is not about me and courage and taking this conversation on. The office that I hold and the people that are with me, we might have started this conversation. But this conversation is really all of you in this room and the thousands of other people that are dying to have this conversation right now in the city of Boston. This isn't a bold aspiration. This is a time where our nation is in great transition. We have no idea where the leading is going to take us. But I can tell you, in Boston, we are not going to go backwards. We are going forward. Now, what would a dialogue be without a quote? Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality." Think about that. We've been talking and planning these discussions for over 2 years. At this moment in Boston's history, we're going to take a stand. We're going to answer the call to put safety, the rights and the equality for everyone in our city at the top of the agenda every single day. In order for us to continue moving forward, we must be a city that produces and reproduces every single day, and that's what we're going to do. When we assess these values, it's tempting to think of our city as different. You know, I'm proud of the progress that we've made, our leadership has made in this city over the last 3 years. We are no strangers to inequality. Yesterday or today, we're certainly not immune to history in our city. We know the unique struggles of our country. Religious bigotry and racism arrived with the first colonists. We know that. It's been written about, it's been talked about, it's been spoken about. In many of our own lifetimes, some people in this room, whether it's the busing conflict that brought national attention and neighborhood division to our city, deep scars still remain in our city from that. We have disparities in race, in education, in health, in wealth. We know that. It's nothing new, nothing that anyone in this room hasn't heard before. The main tension in America, I think, is between the ideals and our reality, and how do we continue to move forward. This is what we're here to do. We're here to break the tension. And you can feel it in this room today. We're here to share our experiences, something that has to happen. We're here to talk to each other in a spirit of openness. We need to do that if we truly want to start healing. This isn't about judging one another. This is about learning from one another. I've heard this more than one time. Why are you talking? Why don't you take action? The answer is that change is made possible by people. That's the answer. We are taking action. We're taking action by talking, by sitting down, by understanding. I want us to continue to be a strong city. We're a strong city in so many ways. I could stand up here, and John Barros could stand up here with me, and we could talk about all the great things about Boston and how we're doing so well economically and how strong we are in the country and the world, and we are. We can talk about how our population is bigger than almost any other time in our country. We had a plan to hit 700,000 people by the year 2030. We're going to be close to 800,000 people by 2030. We can talk about the great successes there. But in order to be truly a strong city, we need to understand each other. And that's something that we have to do. My story, a lot of you know my story. I grew up in Dorchester. I grew up in a working class family. My parents were immigrants. They came from Ireland. They came here with really not much. I told the story the other day. My mother and father came to this country not to find the American dream, but to send money back home to their family in Ireland. How many immigrants in our country, in our city today, that are here still today, that might be undocumented, that are here to send money back home? They worked hard. And they gave me every chance, my brother every chance that I needed to be successful. I had the opportunity in 1997 to run for state representative, and as I said earlier, I won. And I represented one of the most diverse districts in the State House. I worked side by side with people of all races and ethnicities to make sure that we had a better life for everybody. That's what I did. I fought against inequality, and I fought against racism, and I fought against disparities while I was a representative. I never thought of myself as privileged. And I didn't think really at that time of Boston as a city of racism. I knew there was issues and we had issues, but I really didn't think a lot about it because we were trying to move things forward, just like my colleagues are here today. I focused on what we had in common. I focused on my colleagues, Russell Holmes is here today, and Russell and myself both represent districts that are diverse and districts that have poor people in them, and some people are doing okay, middle class. That's what I focused on. But recently I got a lesson in thinking of understanding to what barriers really are. I don't know if he's here today, but Will Morales, the Commissioner of Boston Center for Youth and Families, we had a conversation in the office after one of the incidents in the country. A couple of the people that work with me said, we need to have a conversation, Mayor, about race in Boston. And we had about 25 people in the room, and I was the only white person in the room. And we were talking about challenges of how do I deal with as a mayor, and how do I say when I get in front of a camera to make sure that I'm truly speaking for everyone in the city of Boston. And we talked about, the conversation went into neighborhoods and how I grew up and how other people grew up, and we all grew up kind of the same. A lot of us grew up almost in the same neighborhood. But Will talked about learning to drive. And it was a simple question. And he was talking about learning when I learned to drive, when he learned to drive, and when he was teaching his son how to drive a car. And it's the same thing. You know, we have to learn the gas and the brake. We have to learn the shifts and the gears. We have to learn the signals. We have to learn parallel parking. We have to learn going straight and forward and back and straight in all the ways. But something changed with the education of that process. When we talked about getting pulled over, and he said, I'm teaching my son when he gets pulled over to take his wallet out and put it on the dashboard. And this story isn't against the police department, by the way. This is just reality. Just so we're clear, we talk about this. He said, you keep your hands on the wheel, and when you see the officer, answer yes, sir, no, sir. Don't talk back. Don't shift around. Myself and I'll use Jimmy Rooney from Southie as an example, had a different experience. Our first move when we got pulled over might have been to try and think of somebody we know in the police department and throw every name we can possibly throw out there. And then if that didn't work, we went to some family members. And the chances are that we might have known somebody, but the point of it is those experiences are very, very different. So when you think about, if you're sitting in this room today and you're saying, well, you know, I grew up poor, this person grew up poor, I grew up in housing development, this person grew up in housing development, my father was this person's father was this, I grew up in a single family, I grew up in a single family. There are definitely differences. And that's what's going to come out in some of the conversations that we had. The beauty about the conversation was that we had a conversation. It wasn't defensive. I didn't get insulted. No one got insulted about the conversation. We didn't get angry. And that's what the point of the dialogues are all about. Understanding, healing, bonds of healing, together, working together as one city. Part of the conversation. That's what we're doing today. We're starting a conversation. We're going to make sure that as we do this, these conversations are going to go into every neighborhood in the city of Boston. These conversations are going to go from Roxbury to West Roxbury, from Brighton to Mattapan, and every single neighborhood in between. And that's what we need to do. I urge you all to get involved. I urge you all to help us facilitate these conversations. I help you to share what you heard today. I ask you to push back on something you don't agree today with, because sometimes it's important to have these dialogues. We are at an important moment in time in the city of Boston, the United States of America. I'm not going to dwell any more on the presidential election today, or at least for this conversation today. All that I know, except for this last thing, all that I know is that the day after the presidential election, when I was in that room talking to those young people, talking to their sadness, talking to what they thought their hopes and dreams were over. Many of them are here with us today. And they're in the part of history that this never happened. Well, this happened, I guess, 40 years ago, but a different conversation 40 years ago. We are about to take a race conversation to the city of Boston to completely heal the wounds of the past. And people that don't need to be healed, then don't worry about it. But the people that need to be healed, we're going to do it. I was asked a question by a reporter, by Meg Irons from the Boston Globe, and I think Meg's here. Thank you, Meg, for the coverage of these stories. Meg said, what happens after the conversations are over? The point is, these conversations never end. We will be back 1 year from now to talk about the progress we made. But for as long as I am the mayor of the city of Boston, I will continue to come back to talk about where we are as a city, where we are with discussions, where we are with actual feelings in our community. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for being here today. As I said in the beginning, I am a firm believer things happen for a reason. If I didn't have that conversation in July of 2013, and that woman didn't come up and challenge me, we wouldn't be here today. Thank you very much.